Ohai. Aleppo is the largest city of Syria and the center of the same name, the most inhabited governorate of the country. It is located in a nakia of Mount Simeona, area Jebel Semyon. With the population in 2,301,570 inhabitants. 2005. Aleppo was also one of the largest cities of Levant. Throughout many centuries Aleppo was the largest city in Great Syria and third largest in the Ottoman Empire, after Constantinople and Cairo. Aleppo, one of the most ancient constantly inhabited cities of the world, it was populated already, most likely, by the 6th millennium B.C. Excavation in Tel the expert Said and Tel al-Ansari. The south of the old town show that the area was populated, at least in the second half of the 3 millennium B.C. Aleppo is mentioned in Hetski inscriptions, in Mari's inscriptions on Euphrates in central Anatolia, and in the city of Ebla where it is described as one of the main centers of trade and the city of military art. This city takes an important place in the history as it is located on the Great Silk Way passing through Central Asia and Mesopotamia. When in 1869 the Suez Canal was discovered, freights began to transport on water and a role of Aleppo as trade city decreased. Shortly before the beginning of a civil war in Syria Aleppo endured the short period of revival. In 2006 the city won the title Capital of Islamic Culture. It is located in a northern part of Syria, between Oronte and Euphrates, on the Steppe River. At the northwest foot of the fruitless height, in the wide hollow surrounded from all directions with high limy walls at the height of 380 meters, in 350 kilometers to the northeast from Damascus. Etymology. In the ancient time Aleppo was known under a name to Halp or Haliben, and Greeks and Romans called it Varoia. During Crusades and then in the period of the French mandate to Syria and Lebanon the city called in Italian Aleppo instead of Alep. However, the origin of the ancient name Aleppo, Halab is not clear. Some assume that Halab means iron or copper as it was the main producer of these metals in the ancient town. Means Halab on Aramaic, white. Supporters of this version refer to color of the soil and abundance of marble in this area. One more explanation comes from national etymology and consists in that means Halab milked. Milk. Sending to an ancient legend that Abraham milked two travelers. They asked each other, Halaba Ibrahim, that is, Ibrahim milked. Color of his cow was red. Therefore the city is called Halab of an Ashshak. Geography. Aleppo is in 120 km from the Mediterranean Sea, at the height of 380 m above sea level, and 45 km to the east from the Syrian-Turkish border. The city is surrounded with agricultural holdings in the north and the west where cultivation of pistachio and olive trees is widespread. In the east Aleppo is surrounded by the Syrian desert. This city was founded in several kilometers to the south from location of the old city, on the right river bank of Kuk. The old town lies on the left river bank. It was surrounded with 8 hills forming a circle with a radius of 10 km in which center there was the main high hill. On this hill the fortress dated 2000 BC was constructed. These hills are called Tel the Expert Said, Tel Aisha, Tel Eset, Tel Al Yasmin, Tel Al Ansari, Yerukiya, Anatol, Al Jaliam and Baksaita. The old town was fenced with the ancient wall consisting of 9 gates. The wall was surrounded by a wide deep ditch. Of 190 km, Aleppo is one of the most quickly growing cities in the Middle East. The development plan for the city adopted in 2001 provided expansion of total area of Aleppo to 420 km. By the end of 2015, the climate of Aleppo is very close to Mediterranean. At the same time, the plateau on which the city is located considerably reduces the warming up effect of the Mediterranean Sea in winter months. That this winter in Aleppo much more cold than in other Mediterranean cities, though it also is less long. On the average temperature of January, the winter is comparable with a winter on the southern coast of the Crimea. At the same time, stable night frosts are noted at night. At warm day, the weather very often changes. In separate years, the serious cold snaps reaching 5°C, and occasionally 10°C are possible. Often snow drops out. Separate winters are snow and are followed by formation of temporary snow cover. In the winter, windy, wet weather dominates. The summer is very hot and almost without any precipitations. However, it comes to an end also earlier than in the Mediterranean cities. Temperature averages plus 36°C in the afternoon, but more than plus 40°C often rise. The spring in Aleppo comes conditionally in the second half of February and lasts until the end of April. The fall in Aleppo very short, and it is only in November. History. Aleppo, one of the most ancient cities of the world, it was populated in the 6th millennium BC. Excavation in Tel the expert Said and Tel al-Ansari. The south of the old town, so that the area was populated in the second half of the 3rd millennium BC. Aleppo is mentioned in Hetski inscriptions, in Mari's inscriptions on Euphrates in central Anatolia, and in the city of Ebla, where it is described as one of the main centers of trade and military art. Aleppo appears in historical records much earlier than Damascus. The first mention of it goes back to the 3rd millennium BB, when Aleppo was the capital of the independent kingdom of Ebla. The city was known as Armi in Ebla and under the name of Armanum in Akkad. To plank beds crossing the Tsar of Akkad. His grandfather, Sargon Drevny, destroyed Ebla and Armand in the 23rd century BC. During the late Babylon period of Aleppo, it is for the first time mentioned under the name of Halab. Halab, Halba. The city was the capital of the Amoreski kingdom Yamkat. The kingdom Yamkat, 1800–1600. Also known as the Earth of Aleppo, at the time was the strongest and powerful kingdom in the Middle East. Yamkat was destroyed by Hetta at Mersalia in the 16th century BC. However, Aleppo soon renewed the leading role in Syria when Hetski forces in the region weakened because of internal contentions. Having used anarchy in the region, Paratarna, the Tsar of the Haritski kingdom Mitanni, conquered Aleppo in the 15th century BC. Subsequently, Aleppo appeared on the front line in fight between Egypt, Mitanni and the Hetski kingdom. At of Suppilulium I defeated Mitanni and conquered Aleppo in the 14th century BB. Of Aleppo had cult value for Het. It was the center of worship of god of weather. When the Hetski kingdom failed in the 12th century BB, Aleppo became a part Aramaic orphaned Hetskogo kingdom's Arpad, and later it became the capital Aramaic orphaned Hetskogo Hatarik Lukutis kingdoms. In the 9th century BB of Aleppo became a part of the new Assyrian kingdom, and after the new Babylon kingdom and the empire of Achaemenid. Antiquity. Alexander of Macedon won the city in 333 BC. Seleucus founded the Greek settlement here. 301-286 BB. And named him Varia in honor of the city of Varia in the Macedonian Empire. Varia remained under dominion Seleucida nearly 300 years. The Board of Rome ensured stability and safety of northern Syria throughout more than 3 centuries. During the Roman era the population in northern Syria considerably increased. It grew as well during dominion of Byzantines in the 5th century. During era of late antiquity of Varia there was the second largest city after Antioch, the capitals of Syria, and the third largest city in the Roman Empire. Archaeological data confirm dense population in villages and towns between Antioch and Varia in the 6th century of our era. Now in these settlements also churches, such as St. Simeon Stylites' church are ancient at home. Saint Maron was probably born in this region. Its grave is in Brad, to the west from Aleppo. Middle Ages. The ancient walls of Aleppo and Women restored in 1256 by Nasser Yusuf. Sassanida intruded in Syria at the beginning of the 7th century. Soon Aleppo was conquered by Arabs under leadership Khalid ibn Valida in 637. In 944 it became the residence of the independent emirate of the Hamdanidsky prince Say al-Dawla, and the city prospered, being the house of the great poet al-Mutanabi and the philosopher al-Farabi. The city was returned by Byzantines in 962 and was as a part of the Eastern Roman Empire. Byzantine. From 974 to 987 year. Aleppo and its emirate became the vassal state since 969 to the Byzantine Seljuk of Wars. In 1024-1080 with small breaks the city the dynasty Murdasidov operated. Aleppo was twice besieged by Crusaders, in 1098 and 1124, but not conquered. The earthquake which happened in 1138 destroyed the city and its vicinities. It is impossible to rely completely on estimates of the time, but, nevertheless, it is considered that Kard people died, thus doing it by the 5th most killing earthquake in the history of mankind. On January 24, 1260 Aleppo I was taken by Mongols led by Hulagu together with knights of the Prince of Antioch Bohemond VI and his father-in-law, the Tsar of Armenia Hetimi. The city was badly protected Ayyubadi Turan Shah. Walls failed after 6 days of bombing, and a citadel in 4 weeks. It is a lot of Muslims and Jews died, and the Christian population was spared. As Mongols respected Turan Shah for his bravery, they did not kill him. Then the city was transferred to the former emir of the city of Homs, Al-Ashraf Mausa. In the city the Mongolian garrison was established. The award was presented also to Hetemi for its help in capture of Aleppo. Then the Mongolian troops went towards Damascus, and it surrendered. Mongols entered Damascus on March 1, 1260. In September 1260, Mamelukes held negotiations on signing of the contract with Franks from Acre, who allowed them to pass freely through Crusaders and engaged with Mongols. On September 3, 1260, Mamelukes won a victory, having killed the Mongolian military leader Tukitbek, and in 5 days anew captured Damascus. Muslims seized Aleppo in a month, and the governor of Mamelukes remained to run the city. In December of the same year, Hulagu sent troops to try to return himself Aleppo. Mongols killed a large number of Muslims in revenge for Kitbuki's death, but as it was not succeeded to capture the city within 2 weeks by him, they were forced to recede. In October 1271, Mongols managed to capture Aleppo again, having won against the Turkmen troops protecting the city, and 10,000 army from Anatolia. Garrisons of Mamelukes ran to the city of Hama, but Baburs returned with the army to defend Aleppo, and Mongols receded. On October 20, 1280, Mongols anew seized Aleppo, robbing the markets and setting fire to mosques. Muslim residents ran to Damascus, where the leader of Mamelukes Al-Mansur Khalan collected the forces. When its army approached Aleppo, Mongols receded again, coming back through Euphrates. In 1400, the Turkic leader Tamerlan won the city from Mamelukes. The great number of inhabitants was killed. The tower was outside the city, constructed of thousands of human skulls. After leaving of Mongols, all Muslim population came back to Aleppo. But the Christians who left the city during invasion of Mongols could not move back in the quarter in the old town. It led them to creation of the new quarter in 1420, built outside city walls in the northern suburb of Aleppo. This new quarter was called Al-Jadid, the new area in Arab. Modern times. In the 19th century, in the city there were 2 large Jewish break-in. In 1947, after formation of Israel, in the city there was a large disorder, as a result of which Massachusetts' departure of Jews to Israel began. The city after fight. In 2012, during the civil war in Syria, the city became the arena of heavy fighting between anti-governmental insurgents and the terrorist groups on the one hand and government troops, with another. The active phase of fights began summer of 2012. Originally mainly moderate oppositional groups and government troops, and also the Kurdish fighters from groups of national self-defense were involved in opposition. Gradually, among anti-governmental forces, radical Islamist groups, including the Al-Nusra Front and Islamic State, began to play the increasing role, and war on the party of the government was entered by numerous allied armed groups. Generally Shiite militias from Lebanon, Iraq and Afghanistan, and also military advisors from Iran. From the beginning in September 2015 of the Russian military operation in Syria, the Russian Air Force's striking aviation missile strikes at the insurgent and terrorist groups joined the armed opposition in Aleppo. Being the largest city of the country on the population and before war being considered as the economic capital of Syria, Aleppo was considered by parties of the conflict and experts as having great strategic and political value, and fights for control over the city as the decisive front. It caused the long and fierce nature of fighting which led to Massachusetts' destructions of city infrastructure and big losses among civilians. Having attacked the city in the summer of 2012, insurgent groups quickly enough occupied about 40% of its territory. Their further promotion, however, was stopped, and in 2012-2013 the situation purchased deadlock character. Fighters managed to cut the strategic highway Damascus-Aleppo for control, over which heavy fighting was started. On January 15, 2013, powerful explosions took place in the territory of the local university. As a result of explosion died 80 and about 150 people, among whom there were students and refugees placed in the territory of the university, were wounded. On March 12, the Syrian troops and rebels resumed fights for the international airport of Aleppo. Insurgents also attacked Arab air bases and the Mananir airport. On March 19, in the suburb of Aleppo, Khan el-Asali, was applied nerve gas and therefore 15 people died. By October 2013, a half of the city was kept by government troops, other part, various groups of insurgents. The population of the city in time since the beginning of the conflict was reduced from 2.5 million to less than 1 million people. In 2014-2015, the Syrian army, supported by allied rebels and the Iranian military personnel, performed a series of successful operations which laid the foundation for future environment and storm of the city. March 4, 2015, there was a powerful explosion at the building of investigation of the Air Force of Syria in Aleppo. Rebels put in action the destructive device in the tunnel located under the intelligence agency building. More than 30 people died. At night on July 12, as a result of powerful explosion of a tunnel in the old city, the wall of the citadel of Aleppo, entered in the UNESCO World Cultural Heritage List, was strongly damaged. The beginning of the Russian military operation in Syria in September 2015 allowed to change radically a situation in Syria for benefit of Bashar al-Assad's government, to unblock Aleppo, and further, to establish control over all territory of the city. In February 2016, the Syrian army, during successful approach, surrounded Aleppo from the north, having cut lines of supply of fighters from the Turkish border. During the summer campaign of 2016, the army finished a complete environment of the city and began its siege. By estimates for September 2016, in the east part of Aleppo, controlled opposition and terrorists. There were about 250,000 inhabitants in the western part, controlled by government forces. Minus 1.5 million people. On July 28, Russia, together with the Syrian authorities, of the beginning humanitarian operation in Aleppo. 3 humanitarian corridors were opened for the civilian population, the 4th for an exit of fighters. In August, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs of the Union, OCH, stated concern about the worsening situation with security and a humanitarian situation in the city, in particular in East Aleppo. Later, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said that in the city the probability of the humanitarian disaster is high. The Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations on Humanitarian Issues, Stephen O'Brien, pointed to availability of the humanitarian disaster at the end of September. Then the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon accused Syria and Russia of war crimes, use of fire and bunker bombs against residential districts of Aleppo. On November 15, 2016, with massive aviation and rocket support of Russian air forces, the Syrian army began approach for the purpose of capture of uncontrollable east part of the city, in a month led to crash of defensive boundaries of fighters and transition of the city under control of the government. To the middle of December 2016, the city was completely busy with government troops. By the evening on December 22, 2016, the city finally passed under control of government forces. After release of the city, its residential quarters repeatedly were exposed to mortar and rocket attacks from fighters that led to the new victims. Restoration. Aleppo strongly suffered during military operations. Many local attractions sustained damage or were destroyed. The set of production enterprises of the economic capital of the country was plundered by. In July 2019, the central city Al-Saktai market entering the UNESCO World Cultural Heritage List was restored. In August 2019, restoration of housing and infrastructure of the city still continued. To fall of 2019, a number of industrial productions was restored. The refugees who came back to the city took part in restoration of Aleppo. Population. Most of residents of Aleppo, Muslim Arabs. The Christian population consists of Armenians, Greeks, Maronites, the Syrian Catholics. There are Jewish and American Protestant communities. Historical data. At the beginning of the 19th century, Aleppo was inhabited by 200,000 inhabitants. The city had the extensive industry and trade. Its factories supplied all east with silk, paper, woolen and brocade matters. But the earthquake, plague and cholera undermined his welfare. According to the historian from Aleppo, to the Sheikh Kamal al-Ghazi, 1853-1933. The population of the city to a destructive earthquake of 1822 were made by 400,000 people. Then from cholera and plague, 1823 and 1827 respectively. The population of Aleppo was reduced to 110,000 people. In 1901, the total number of residents of Aleppo was 108,143 persons, from whom Muslims -76329, 70.58%. Catholic Christians -24508, 22.66%. And Jews -7306, 6.76%. The Christian population considerably increased with inflow of the Armenian refugees. After genocide of Armenians of 1915, and the Syrian Christians from other cities. After arrival of the first group of the Armenian refugees, 1915-1922. The population of Aleppo in 1922 became 156,748 people. Muslims made of them 97600 inhabitants, 62.26%. Catholic Christians -14.11%. Jews -6580, 4.20%. The number of Europeans in the city was 2652, 1.70%. The Armenian refugees -20007, 12.76%. And others -7792, 4.97%. The second flow of the Armenian refugees in the direction of Aleppo was caused by withdrawal of the French troops from Cilicia in 1923. In 1923-1925 in the city there arrived more than 4,000 Armenians, and the population of Aleppo reached card people by the end of 1925, of whom Armenians made more than 25%. According to the historical data provided by the Sheikh Ramal al-Ghazi, the vast majority of Christians of the city of Aleppo were Catholics, up to the last days of Ottoman dominion. Growth of Orthodox Christians is connected, on the one hand, with the arrival of the Armenian and Syrian Christians who survived in Cilicia and the southern Turkey. And on the other hand, with the arrival of a large number of Orthodox Greeks from Sandak Alexandretta, after its annexation for benefit of Turkey. 1939. In 1944 the population of Aleppo made about card people were 112,110. 34.5%. Christians. From them Armenians -60200. Armenians made more than a half of the Christian community of Aleppo till 1947, while many of them went to the Soviet Armenia within the Armenian repatriation. 1946-1967. Aleppo is the most densely populated city in Syria, with the population in 2,181,061 persons. 2004. According to the official assessments announced by City Council of Aleppo, the population of the city reached 2,301,570 by the end of 2005. More than 80% of residents of Aleppo are Sunni Muslims. These are first of all Arabs, Kurds and Turkmens. Other Muslim groups include Adi, Circassians, Kabardians, Adaigs, Chechens, Albanians, Bosnians and Polmak. According to the estimates given in 2010 in the final project report of City Development of Aleppo, carried out by Municipality of the City and the TEDS Company, a framework of the joint Syrian-German Programme of Sustainable City Development, it was expected that the annual population growth of the city within the next 10 years will make about 2.7% a year, and population size will reach 3.6 million inhabitants. One of the largest Christian communities in the Middle East, Aleppo was before war by the house for many East Christians, generally Armenians, the Syrian Christians and Greeks Melkitov. Before the war in the city there lived more than 250,000 Christians, making about 12% of total population size. The considerable number of the Syrian Christians in Aleppo are from the city of Urfa, Turkey, and speaks Armenian. The big community of Christians belongs Armenian Apostolic, Syrian Orthodox and Greek Orthodox to churches. In Aleppo was many Catholics, including Greeks Melkitov, Maronites, Latinian, impudent persons and the Syrian Catholics. In several districts of the city the Christian and Armenian population, such as Old Christian Quarter of Steed prevails. Modern Christian areas are called Azizia, Suleymaniya, Gardi Baghdad, Yeruban Maidan. In Aleppo 45 operating churches belonging to above-mentioned faiths. The Arabic-speaking population of Aleppo speaks the North Syrian dialect which is called Shaf. In Aleppo several architectural styles are mixed. Numerous aggressors, from Byzantines and the Seljuks to Mamelukes and Turks, left the marks on a city architecture for 2000. There are various constructions of the 13th and 14th centuries, such as hotels, Muslim schools and hammams, Christian and Muslim constructions in the Old Town and the Quarter of Steed. This quarter there is a large number of houses 16 and 17 of the centuries belonging to the Aleppo bourgeoisie. In Azizi houses 19 and the beginnings of the 20th centuries in Baroque style are located. In the new quarter Shakba various architectural styles are mixed. Neoclassics, Norman, East and even Chinese styles. Aleppo is completely paved by a stone, in some places big white blocks. While the old city is characterized by a large number of mansions, narrow streets and the covered markets, at a modern part of the city there are wide roads and the big areas, such as Sadal al-Jabiri Square, Liberty Square, Presidente Square and Sabah Bakrat Square. There is quite clear split between old and new Aleppo. An old part is put into the walls forming a circle of 5 km with 9 gates. The huge medieval castle known as the Citadel of Aleppo is in the center of an ancient part. It was constructed like an acropolis. Historically it developed that Aleppo constantly passed from hand to hand, was under control of the different states, the political situation was unstable. With respect to Aleppo, inhabitants built the certain quarters which were divided by the religious principle which were socially and economically independent. A good example of such quarters is the known Christian quarter of Steed. The old city of Aleppo can be divided into 2 parts. Old part and Steed. As it was already described above, an old part was constructed in walls while Steed, the Christian quarter built at the beginning of the 15th century after an exit of the Mongolian troops from the city. After in 1400 Tamerlane intruded in Aleppo and completely destroyed it, Christians were forced to leave. But in 1420 they created the quarter in the northwest of the city, the quarter of Steed. Residents of this area generally were engaged in a brokerage, were intermediaries between foreign dealers and local merchants. The total area of the ancient city is about 3.5 km. There live more than 120,000 inhabitants. Strategic provision of this trade city attracted people of all races and beliefs wishing to use commercial roads as through Aleppo there passed the Great Silk Way. The largest covered market in the world is in Aleppo, 13 kilometers long. Al-Medina, as he is called here, is a shopping center where bring luxury goods, such as raw silk from Iran, spices and dyes from India, and coffee from Damascus. It is also possible to find in Al-Medina also products of local production. Wool, agricultural products and known Aleppo soap. The majority of the markets was constructed in the 14th century. They are called in honor of various professions and crafts. Woolen market, copper market and so on. In addition to goods in the market also khans or caravanserai accommodate. Beautiful facades and entrances with wooden doors are characteristic of caravanserai. The most known markets and caravanserai khans of the ancient city. Hang at-Qadi constructed in 1450, one of the oldest caravanserai of Aleppo. Hang al-Bergel constructed in 1472. The Baovez Soban, the soap khan constructed at the beginning of the 16th century is near shops of soap. By Khan and Natkasin or copper market. It is constructed in 1539. It is known for the traditional and modern footwear, supports 84 shops. Hang Ash-Shun is built in 1546. In objects of crafts of traditional Aleppo art are on sale. Bahang al-Harar or silk khan. It is constructed in the second half of the 16th century, has 43 shops and specializes in the basic in trade in textiles. Bahang Al Gumruk, Ali Customs Khan, textile shopping center with 55 shops. Constructed in 1574, Hang Al Gumruk is considered the largest khan in ancient Aleppo. The Bahang Al Uazer, constructed in 1682, is considered the main market of cotton products in Aleppo. Ba Al Atarin, a grass market. Traditionally was the main market of spices in Aleppo. Now it functions as the center of sale of textiles with 82 shops. Azarbsba, or Azarbsba. Here coins in the period of Mamelukes were minted. Now this market has 71 shops, the majority of which deals with textiles and basic needs of Bedouins. Al-Bekermaya's Ba has 52 grocery stores, is located near the Mosque Bekermaya. The Ba of Labama Haddadin is the market of old traditional smiths, consists of 37 shops. Ba al-Atik, the old market specializing in skin sale, includes 48 shops. Al-Sayyagsba, the jewelry market consisting of 99 shops, which is the main center of trade in jewelry in Aleppo and in the whole country. The Khan Veneziantsov was the house of the consul of Venice and the Venetian merchants. Ba of Nizwan, the women's market, the place where it is possible to find all necessary for the bride. Accessories, clothes and so on. Es-Suwaika, or Suwikat Ali. Suwika means the small market in Arabic. The large market which supports the shops, which are generally specializing in the equipment of the house and kitchen. Many traditional khans also function as the markets in the Christian quarter of Steed. Ba al-Hokun, or Hang al-Qads. Hokun means the spiritual house in Armenian, as it was constructed as hotel for the Armenian pilgrims on the way to Jerusalem. An old part of Hokun is dated the end of 15th and the beginning of the 16th centuries, while a new part was constructed in the 17th century. Now it turned into large market with the numerous shops specializing in trade in clothes. Es-Salib, center of old Christian cathedrals. The Ba of Es-Sa for the market of wool surrounded with old churches. Ba Bet al-Kasab, shop of wooden products. Sites. The most ancient monument in the city is the water supply system 11 km long, built still by Romans. The enormous wall in 10 m of height and 6.5 m of thickness, with 7 gates, separates the city from suburbs. The covered Kostany Dvor market takes to several streets, all consists of codes and is lit from above through the windows done partly in special domes. In Aleppo there are 7 large churches together with 3 monasteries and the Mosque El Alav in the old Roman style, built originally under church by the Empress Elena. The main objects of export and at the same time the main products of the country: wool, cotton, silk, wax, pistachios, soap, tobacco, wheat, which are taken out mainly to France and to the Turkish harbors. The industry is limited to silk products. Residents of Aleppo generally consider themselves sheriffs, that is Muhammad's descendants. One more pride of inhabitants, the citadel, which bases towers over the city on 50 meters. Long time all city lay within a citadel, and only in the 16th century, after transition of Aleppo under the power of the Ottoman Empire, the city began to expand gradually and outside fortifications. In Aleppo there is a tomb of the poet Nasimi. Historical buildings. The citadel of Aleppo, big fortress at top of the hill, towers on 50 m over the city. It is dated in the I millennium AD. Some details were completed in the 13th century. It was damaged as a result of earthquakes, in particular, in 1822. Helawais Madrasa, constructed in 1124 on the former place of Cathedral of Street Helena. Then Saint Helena, Constantine the Great's mother, constructed big Byzantine cathedral there. When Crusaders aggressors plundered the city, the chief judge of the city transformed Street Helena's cathedral to the mosque, and, at last, in the middle of the 12th century Nur ad-Din founded madrasa, that is religious school here. Anatbak al-Azhami, the palace of the beginning of the 12th century located near a citadel was constructed by the Emir Mads ad-Din bin Adiyah. It was repaired in the 15th century. In 1967-1975 the Museum of National Traditions was placed here. Ash-Shabani 12th Cultural Center of a Century. The ancient church and Franciscan Missionary School of Maria, which are in the old city, function as the cultural center now. Macadamia's Madrasa, one of the oldest theological schools in the city, it was constructed in 1168. Zachary Madrasas. It is constructed in 1217 to the south from Women al-Makam, on Az-Zir Hazi. Sultanized Madrasa, begun by the governor of Aleppo Az-Zahir Hazi and finished in 1223-1225 his son Malik by Al-Aziz Muhammad. Madrasa al-Firdas, the mosque called by the most beautiful mosque Aleppo. It was constructed by the widow of the governor of Aleppo Az-Zahir Hazi in 1234-1237. The courtyard, in which there is a pool to the Verdina surrounded with arches with antique columns, is remarkable. National Library of Aleppo was under construction in the 1930th years and opened in 1945. Grand Syria di Aleppo is the former residence of the city governor. Was under construction in the 1920th and it was open in 1933. Kank al-Farafira, the Sufi monastery built in 1237. Bimaristan Argan al-Kamali, a shelter which worked since 1354 before the beginning of the 20th century. Radhab Pasha's Gift, the big mansion built in the 16th century near Al-Handak Street. Recently Win. The house was restored and turned into the big cultural center with the auditorium inside. Gaitjan Blad, the old palace constructed at the end of the 16th century by the Kurdish governor of Aleppo Hussein Pasha January Polat. Alatmania's Madrasa, the Islamic school located in a northern part of Women of An-Nasr. It was created by the Ottoman Pasha al-Durraki in 1730 and originally was called Madrasa of Ridaiya. Beit Marash. Old Aleppo mansion which is in the quarter of Al-Farafira. Marash was constructed at the end of the 18th century by family. Chapel of Women of Al-Farah. It is constructed in 1898-1899 by the Austrian architect Cartier. The most known historical buildings of the Christian quarter of Steed. Beit Ghazali. The mansion of the 17th century decorated by the Armenian sculptor Hachidar Bali in 1691. Here in the 20th century there was the Armenian school. Beit Dalal, that is, the house Dalal, was constructed in 1826 on the place of the old monastery. In quality the hotel functions now. Beit Yakel, the Aleppo mansion built in 1603, attracts with the unique wooden jewelry. One of these scenery was delivered to Berlin and exposed in Pergamon Museum, known as Aleppo Room. Hift Basel. The house of the beginning of the 18th century is turned into business school in 2001. Zamaria's Gate, constructed at the end of the 17th century and belonging to Zamaria's family since the beginning of the 18th century. Now it is boutique hotel. Museum of Aleppo. Museum of National Traditions, Aleppo House in Beit Achikbash, Zdid. Museum of a Citadel of Aleppo. The Museum of Medicine and Science to Bimaristan Argan al-Kamli. The Museum of Memory of Aleppo in Beit Ghazala, Adida. The Museum of the Armenian Apostolic Church in Blessed Virgin Mary, Zdid's Old Armenian Church. Gate. Cult constructions. The Great Mosque Aleppo. Bayemi of Al-Kabir. The Mosque Umayyadov is founded in 715 by Walid I, and most likely, his successor Sulaiman completed the construction. The building Zachariah, the father John the Baptist, contains a grave. The mosque was damaged during the Mongolian invasion in 1260 and restored. Has 4 facades of different styles. Hushruwiya, the mosque, finished in 1547, is constructed on the project of the famous Ottoman architect Sinan. Al-Nukta Mosque and Al-Nakta Mosque. Mosque of a Drop. Blood. Shiite Mosque. It is considered that on this place there was a monastery turned into the mosque in 944 earlier. Al-Adalija Mechit, constructed in 1555 by the governor of Aleppo Muhammad of Pask. Al-Safakiya, the mosque built in 1425 with remarkably issued octagonal minarets. Al-Kakan of the mosque. The Mosque of Crows, with 2 ancient basalt columns at an entrance. In the mosque there is a stone block with Hetski inscriptions. Mosque 1318. Altenboga. Al-Tawsha, the mosque. The 14th century, it is restored in 1537. With the big facade decorated with columns. Cathedral of 40 Martyrs. The Armenian Church in Adida. The 16th century. The Central Synagogue of Aleppo is constructed ap. 1200 by the Jewish community. Maronite, Syrian Orthodox Christians, Catholic and many other churches in the old Christian quarter of Zdid. Dead cities. Aleppo surrounds a set of historical monuments and the most ancient remains of the dead cities. They represent a group of 700 abandoned settlements in the northwest of Syria. These cities are dated 5th century BB and contain elements of the Byzantine architecture. The most important dead cities and archaeological sites near Jebel Semen, Nant Simeona, include the Kalota Loch, located in 20 km to the northwest from Aleppo. It was constructed as the Roman temple in the 2nd century of our era. After transition to Christianity in the 5th century, the temple was turned into a basilica. As a result of wars between Hamdanida and Byzantines, the church was turned into the loch in the 10th century. While two churches near the loch remained. The Eastern Church constructed in 492 and a Roman Catholic Church. The 6th century. Basilica of Harb Shams, one of the oldest, most well-remained Christian constructions in Levant. The Byzantine Church, which is in 21, came to the northwest from Aleppo, goes back to the 4th century. The Favortan Church, half-ruined Roman basilica, is dated 372 of our era, is located in 22, came to the northwest from Aleppo. According to the Aleppo historian Abdallah Hadzher, this basilica is considered one of the oldest church constructions in the world. The settlement of Tsirkania, located in 23, came to the northwest from Aleppo, represents a remaining balance of the old Byzantine settlement with a half-ruined chapel of the 6th century. Kafakira is the settlement in the village of Burzgaider. It is located in 24, came to the northwest from Aleppo. There are a lot of half-ruined Christian constructions relating to the 4th and 6th centuries. The historical settlement of Sinkhar or Simkhar is located in 24, came to the northwest from Aleppo. Being in the isolated valley, the village was populated between the 2nd and 7th centuries. The Sinkhar Church is one of the oldest churches of Syria and goes back to the 4th century, and the chapel of the 6th century nearby is located. Basilica Mushabbak. Well-remained churches of the second half of the 5th century. About 470. Are located in 25, came to the west from Aleppo, near the city of Derates. Moadzakar Bur Suleiman, the village, the historical settlement located in 26, came to the northwest from Aleppo. The place of an old hermetical tower with well-remained chapels of the 6th century. Churches of the village of Sheikh Suleiman, located in 28, came to the west from Aleppo. In the village there are 3 ancient churches. The destroyed church, which is in the center of the settlement. Well-remained southern basilica constructed in 602. And Blessed Virgin Mary's Church, dated the 5th century, which is considered one of the most beautiful churches in northern Syria. Also there is a hermetical tower in a northern part of the village. Kofanabo in 29 came to the west from Aleppo. This old Assyrian settlement of the 9th century BB and the place of the old Roman temple, which was transformed to church later. There are a lot of well-remained apartment houses of the 5th and 6th centuries. Rad, the city located in 32, came to the west from Aleppo. Many old basilicas, such as Maronite Monastery of Street, Yulian Anazarsky, 399-402 ad. Have where there is St. Maron's Temple, and the basilica in a northern part of the village, built in 561. The settlement of Kimar is located in 35, came to the northwest from Aleppo. The village of the Roman and Byzantine eras, is dated the 5th century of our era, contains a lot of well-remained churches, towers and old water storage tanks. The St. Simeon Stylites Temple. Deir Semen, which well-remained and one of the most known church monuments in Syria, dated the 5th century. Is approximately in 35, came to the northwest from Aleppo. Deir Semen is one of the oldest Christian churches in the world. The settlement of Sugain, located in 40 km to the northwest from Aleppo. There are 2 half-ruined churches and old reservoirs. The Ainutara, Orphanhetski, the Temple of the Iron Age, is located in 45 km to the northwest from Aleppo. It is known for the similarity to Solomon's temple as it is described in the Bible. The survived sculptures represent lions and sphinxes. It is comparable with cherubs of the first temple. However, Solomon's temple was built approximately in 1000–900 years BC, and the Ainutara already existed by then. The Ainutara was constructed in honor Ishtar, goddesses of fertility, or in honor of the female goddess Astarte, or in honor of the deity Baal-Hadad. This question remains disputable. The settlement of Women Al-Jwa, located in 50 km to the west from Aleppo on border with Turkey. The place with a large number of old churches of the 4th century and well-remained gate of the 6th century of our era. Kairos, also known as Syria or Iupolis. The ancient city located in 65 km to the north from Aleppo. There is Cosmas and Damian's most ancient temple, known as the Temple of Nabieri, and also an old Roman amphitheater and 2 old Roman bridges. Economy. The main economic role of the city is trade place, and it is located at the intersection of 2 tradeways and mediation in trade with India. It continued to prosper until Europeans did not begin to use the sea route to India bypassing the Cape of Good Hope and then to use a route through Egypt to the Red Sea. Since then, in the city, agricultural export in adjacent regions, mainly wheat, cotton, pistachios, olives and sheep, decreased. The main industries are textile, chemical, pharmaceutical, agro-processing, production of electrical equipment, alcoholic beverages. Tourism is also developed. Aleppo is the largest city agglomeration in the Syrian Republic and the greatest industrial center where more than 50% of industrial workers of the country are employed, and still the big share of export income is made. Aleppo is located in a zone very favorable for the agricultural industry. In the city, tourism was developed. Famous sightseeing places: the Fortress of Aleppo, 411, 880. The Museum of the Aleppo Citadel, 31847. The National Museum, 24090. There are 3 5-star hotels, 11 Chetarek Ravets, 8 3-star, 11 2-star, 61 1-star hotels, 11 hostels. Education. At the University of Aleppo, about 6,000 students study. During fighting, the university was under control of government forces, however suffered from missile strikes. Transport infrastructure. In the city, the railway station and the international airport of Aleppo is located. From urban transportation, there was a tram earlier, till 1969. But now there is no alternative to the bus. Territorial division. The city is divided into regions of 4 types: old quarters in city walls, old quarters out of city walls, the modern outskirts, informal settlements. Informal settlements had a number of problems. Lack of regulation of the status of the earth. Settlements are created in a contradiction with zone plans. Plant standards are not observed. Buildings were built in a contradiction with construction standards and standards. More than 40% of the population of the city live in informal settlements. Planning areas. Usually -card people. 250 people on hectare. Central -card people. 200 people on hectare. Western -card people. 100 people on hectare. Northwest -card people. 150 people on hectare. Northeast -card people. 300 people on hectare. East -card people. 395 people on hectare. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.